Welcome to Streams of Income, hosted by best-selling author and entrepreneur Dr. David Powers, where we discuss streams of income, passive income, residual income, and even why there are dinosaurs and zombies in this intro. Fasten your seatbelts and get ready to dive in.
Hey everybody, I don't normally go back after a podcast and do a new intro, but I wanted to for this one because there's something really cool that happens at the end of this interview. So you're getting ready to see or hear my interview with Dr. Axel. And we talk a lot about leadership, organizations, his triple careers, and investing. But here's the thing, because of his experience in the Air Force, and also he's originally from Germany. And so I wanted to ask him a few questions about recent military actions that have taken place. And you'll hear it all, but the U.S. bombing in Iran is what I asked him about for two reasons. One, because he flew fighter jets. Also, I wanted his perspective on the military operation, especially the effects of long-range flying for a mission that far across the globe. And I also wanted to hear his political reaction because I love hearing different perspectives. That's what's great about America and about this world, is being able to digest different perspectives. And what we so often see is people get mad about different viewpoints. And so I want you to hear his from a person with a completely different point of view. You might not agree with him. But nothing he says should make you mad. And so here's the thing. Listen to the first part of the podcast. It's about what he does for a living, investing, his history. But at the end, near the end, we get a little bit heavy. And it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it because I loved hearing his point of view. And so I want you to listen to both parts. It's pretty interesting and a rare thing that I was able to have somebody on here with such a unique perspective. So I just thought I'd give you another intro, and stay tuned in just a second. It'll transition over to the actual podcast itself, and you can hear that. And I hope you enjoy it. And let me know in the comments what you think or any questions you have. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Streams of Income show. And I have a pretty cool guest here today. And interesting thing, I'm actually going to be on his podcast in a few hours. We'll probably release them close to each other. And so you guys could get a full day of Dr. Dave and Dr. Axel. And so I highly encourage you to enjoy that, because we're going to probably talk about different stuff on each one. I'm interviewing him because I want to hear more from him on mine. And so you got to watch them both to get like both points of view. And so Dr. Axel, or is it Dr. Meierhoefer? Which would you prefer?
Oh, first name is fine.
Okay. And I'm always curious. So tell us about yourself, but also the doctorate. All right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I am, just because of what you do, I'm guessing you got it in the Air Force or later?
No, later, after the Air Force.
Okay. Economics or something different?
Well, kind of. It's about leadership and organizational change.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah,
I was exactly. Reading bio and reading up on you, and I was trying to guess what it was in. So tell us about yourself, because I've been reading the bio and everything, and it sounds pretty cool. And so go ahead and tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about you.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I like lately to kind of describe it as 3 careers in one lifetime, in a way. So I started out, I don't want to bore the audience too much with a long version, but the first career was basically joining the Air Force, because at the time when I got out of school, we were in a recession basically, and companies didn't want to hire. I wanted to actually become an airline pilot, but they didn't hire. So the next best thing, if you wanted to fly, was fly for the military. So I joined the Air Force, and I had a pretty unusual career, because halfway through my 22 years term, there was an opportunity as a member of the test flight team to do an exchange job with the US Air Force. So I basically spent a little less than half of my time in the US Air Force and in the United States, flying F-111s, and then before and after I flew what's called GR1, which is a Tornado in Europe. Very similar planes. The one was developed in the early 70s. The other one was developed in the mid 80s. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, very similar. And like they say, join the Air Force, see the world, and I did. So, and ultimately, if you do this for like more than 20 years, there comes a point where your body just can't handle it anymore. And that was good. And in the German Air Force system, you have the opportunity relatively early on to say, do you really want to focus on the flying and all that comes with it, or do you want to have a basically lifetime career?
Okay.
And I always said, even though I know in hindsight it wasn't true, but I always said I really don't want to fly an Air Force desk, right? So when the real flying wasn't possible anymore, I retired. And then the second career, which was the shortest of all, was for me to become or see how it is to be a regular employee. So I became a regular employee in a software company in Santa Barbara for about 4.5 years. And everybody at the end of my Air Force time said, well, with the bachelor's that you have in the Air Force, if you really want to make something out of yourselves out there in the corporate world, you probably need a graduate degree. And so I went to work during the day and then did one of those where you can go after work, you can go and study. And I was very fortunate because in a street over from where the software company was basically a private university.
Oh.
And they had graduate degree program for organizational change management. So it was a combination of management and like things that have to do with like strategy and changing and so forth. Yeah, and so I got a master's degree in that, and the dean of that university felt that I would have what it takes to actually continue. And I really honestly, and even today, I can't really say that I had any clue what I got myself into. But she talked me into it. And so ultimately, I continued finishing the master's and then rolled right into the PhD program. And the only slight difference was the focus was more on strategic leadership, not so much on how an organization runs. And so that's my doctorate in it. And the dissertation I wrote, the study I conducted was, if you want to help people in executive positions to improve, was two things. Is business coaching a good idea to do that? And then the main question the hypothesis of the dissertation was, is it better if you have an external organization or individual come coach your leaders, or is it better for an organization to build coaching as a component of their business and then have internal people that have the necessary qualifications and certifications to the coaching? So I finished that. And the thing that's kind of the funny part why I'm even telling you is, remember, we're talking second career. And what happened more and more as I went at night to go to class and during the day working for the software company, that what happened in the company and what I was learning was literally the opposite of each other. It was literally, this is how you should do it. You go to work the next morning. No, that's not exactly the opposite of what we're doing. And there's a whole list of stories that I could tell how that manifested itself. So ultimately, I came to the conclusion, okay, I have been taught how you're supposed to do it. And I tried, actually, I call it the story of the mutiny, not necessarily that we talk about today, but we tried to actually change the business that I was an employee in to do more of the things that I had learned. And by the way, it wasn't just me saying we should change it. All the other executives, except for the founder, they all agreed we should change it. But when we presented what we thought we should be changed, and not all at once, but gradually, he and the people that financed him said, no, I don't want to do that. And, it's one of those things, David, I don't know, but I think most people in their life have gone through where you believe something strongly enough and you see that where it should be done is not possible because whoever is in charge says, no, we don't do this. It becomes a kind of disingenuous kind of work, right? You go there and yes, you're doing your job and you're getting paid, but it's not right. So for me and for many of the others, it became clear we can't really continue doing this. And so that's when the third part of the career started to say, okay, I did military, I did being a normal WT employee. How is that actually when you're an entrepreneur, when you're basically a business owner? So in 2005, I started my first company, and that's what I'm still doing up to today.
Yeah.
It shifted a little bit. Originally, the company was founded to do mainly consulting and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I did that. But out of it came the interest in how do I actually secure the family financially? And I've initially, purely on my own, for our own family, decided we wanted to start investing in real estate.
Okay.
And as people can probably tell by now, after about like 7 minutes recording, I like to talk. And so I was always excited when I learned something new. I was able to do something new and told people about it and wrote about it on LinkedIn. And more people said, hey, can you help me with this too? I've always wanted to, but I've always been afraid to make mistakes or lose money and stuff. And then sooner or later it became clear, well, maybe I should really make this into the business. So the consulting company still exists, but the main work that I'm doing is basically helping people get on the journey towards what we call the time freedom point, where you basically have made enough investments that are passive income generating so that you no longer have to give your time away for money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, that's pretty cool. I tell you what, I'm sure you've got so many stories about the mismatch between what you were learning and the corporate world.
Yeah.
Tell us one juicy one, like one of the worst ones. Like when you got back to the office, it was like, oh my goodness, what are they thinking?
Well, one of the worst ones I would say is, and you're not just being taught at university, but I think in general, successful business, and there are different words you can use, either need a purpose, or you can say it needs a vision, or it needs a goal that everybody is working towards. Why does the business exist? What does it actually want to do? The second ingredient, and I learned that, but I also knew this. I knew this already from the military times. You need an inspirational leader who people are willing to follow in two ways, in my opinion. One is to follow because of the vision, the purpose, the idea, the goal that we're going after together. But also because when the ups and downs hit or stuff doesn't work out, that there's somebody who kind of can rally the troops, so to speak, or can bring people together, can remind them why we're doing it. And I give you one example that is very recent. Everybody has seen the shit show that happened with the Doge thing and with Elon Musk, and how Tesla was as a company affected by that. And to come in and to say, not only am I the leader by position, I'm committing to spend 24/7 of my focus back on this business because I'm now done with this other thing that caused all this grief. You could almost, like, if you're following this stuff, you could almost feel like the whole 120,000 people or however many are working there to say, okay, the guy is back, and you can see it now. If you look at what is in the news now, all the stuff that they're doing since this has only been like a month or so, right? But that kind of, the combination of the vision, which like in Tesla's case hasn't really changed, but the person that is driving everybody and pushing people and inspiring people and so forth is equally important. So that's one thing that I would say I learned there. And now you take, what is a egregious case where none of that was applied. The software company that I was working for had something called an SBIR contract. That's it's basically Small Business Innovation Program. The R, I don't know exactly what the R stands for, but the idea is, and it still in general exists as a government idea, to say if somebody has a good idea and the government or military has a need, we are willing to fund the person or the entity with a good idea to build it into the solution that we have to fix the need that we have. But the overarching goal is to say, we're giving you this money not just to help us out with your idea, but so that you can evolve your idea and make products out of it that go into the open market, so that sooner or later you're not dependent on this money that we're giving you to get started. It's a little bit like government VC money in a way. Well, it's obviously like everything in the government is regulated, and you can get like 2-year money or you can get 3-year money. And I think the longest you can get is like 5-year money. Like where the government says this is complex enough and so forth, we funding you for the first 5 years. Well, that's the kind of business I was working at. This is why they actually were even in this project that I was doing at the Air Force, where they wanted to offer their software for the Air Force flight operations, both for the German Air Force and for the US Navy. Okay, all fine, all good, very worthy cause. But ultimately, if the goal of the whole thing is that you are building products that make you sustainable on your own without the government, the most egregious thing I would say is when your executive team comes to you and say, we have this idea, this idea, this idea, this idea. We already talked to the software developers. We already talked to marketing, talked to everybody. They're all gung-ho. And the leader of the founder of the company says, oh, no, let's focus on the Navy.
Lots of good ideas, but let's do the other thing.
Well, not only that, but the most egregious thing is if you ask me in the context of what you learn at school, or if you have a doctorate in leadership and organizational change, when you not only know the theory, but your whole team is basically aware, and you're funding the thing that actually is the foundation that the 60 people that are working there can actually have a salary, there is a deadline. Even if you're lucky and you get the 5-year program, but there is a deadline.
Yeah.
And it's literally a matter of survival. And somebody says, oh, no, they're never going to pull the plug. We're just going to keep doing military. That's about as bad as it gets, I would say.
Yeah. And that's a lot of money at stake, too. A lot of money,
and a lot of livelihood. That, for me, the livelihood thing was much more, right? Like I knew at that point, I've had a successful career in the military. I was reasonably good according to people who had done their whole life in a W-2 job. They told me that I fit in pretty well. I just had to get rid of some of my military habits. Like 6 weeks in, somebody said, can I talk to you about emails? I said, okay, well, what about emails? Am I writing too many, too little? I said, no, you're just sounding like a commander. Can you do like a greeting maybe on a thank you every once in a while? And stuff. I said, okay. I know I had to learn that you can't give orders all the time in email. Stuff like that. But no, that was the most, and for me, that was one of those kind of shocking things, right? It's one thing when you say, I have my plan and I have my vision and I have my direction. But when you're dependent that much, and not just by process, but also fundamentally with the money for your employees and stuff, you're literally paying the people out of the government coffers, and they tell you in a year and a half, this thing is going to shut. And you're not willing to do anything to sustain your operation. I mean, the other thing is if you found a business, I don't know if this is interesting to your audience, but anybody who is considering, do I want to be an entrepreneur, right? I would say what I've learned in the last 20 years is relatively early on, you will have to make a decision if you want to have a business or a practice. Mm-hmm. So what I'm doing now is basically a practice. And not just in the sense of which patient am I accepting. They're not really patients, they're participants in the mentoring and investment program, but it's kind of like that. And because most of them want to work with me, I only have, and I also put pretty strict boundaries, how much capacity can I make available to treat patients. If you want to build a business, on the other hand, typically 2 things happen. You want to grow the business to as far and as big as it can go. And this is kind of the funny part in a context of what you learn at school, but also in practicality. In a way, you're making yourself more and more obsolete, right? And my recommendation on what that really means is Jim Collins' book about Good to Great. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you're starting out with this little tuff that can barely hold more than 2 people, and then you get a car that can hold 4, and then you get a van that holds 6 or 8, and then you get a minibus for 15. And at latest point there, you will find out that certain people that started with you have no room in the minibus, and definitely not in the Greyhound bus, right? And that when you think of every position in the Greyhound bus as no longer just an employee, but the leader of a department or division or business center or something like that, that's kind of like the evolution of a business. And obviously, when you first started, you occupied pretty much every seat. Well, in the Greyhound bus, you have one, even if you might be the driver, but you're not on any of the seats anymore, right? And so, you know, a little bit in that kind of analogy, and I think Jim did a great job with the Good to Great and the other books around it to describe what that really means and, you know, how do you actually go about it and what has made some businesses successful and others not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of small businesses. And of course, like you say, when you start out, you're doing everything. Yeah. And that is one of the hardest things is getting a small business owner to let go of anything.
No, it's just, you know, if you say, okay, I want to have a dental practice, there's only so many dental stuff you can do every day.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you mentioned the program in the Air Force in Germany where you they transitioned you to like corporate. I wish we had that here because I was in the military here, and it pretty much the way the system is set up here is you do your time, and then most of the time what happens is guys will get out or leave early instead of retiring and go straight to a corporate job doing the exact same thing but triple the money. I mean that's what I did. I got out of the Army and went into a disaster medicine job with a corporation and was making 3 times the money.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, I mean, if anybody that is currently in the military, regardless which branch, is listening to us, I would say it has never been forbidden. There's no rule in any military I know where you can seek mentorship. And I don't mean mentorship within the ranks or with somebody who has a position that you may be aspiring to get into, but mentorship in a little bit more broader sense. What do I want to do with my life from a job, business, occupational point of view, right? And it doesn't automatically mean you can only have one. But if you ask yourself, okay, number one, what is my specialty? And number one, what is my passion? It's not always assured that those two things are the exact same thing, right? Sometimes you can say there are parts of my passion that I can actually realize in my profession right now. And that's the starting point of a discussion to say, okay, who would I want to reach out to if I wanted to do more of the things I'm actually passionate about? Right. And then you can Google it, you can do AI, you can do whatever to find out who are the people that offer that kind of mentorship. Right. And just reach out to them. And you can do this when your commission is about to end. But I always feel like 2 years before, depending on how long you have in your commitment. But if you're pretty sure that you're not going to renew, I would say about 2 years before or within the last 2 years, ask yourself that question and then start reaching out and find people. And I also, in this context, I find it very important that you interview those people. The most important thing, this by the way applies to my work as a mentor for investing in real estate as well. It is super important that you interview the people. I always invite my patients/clients to interview me to see what is the human connection. Mm-hmm. And part of the human connection is, does the person have evidence that they have at least a pretty good idea, if not gone through the same thing that I'm about to go through. So when somebody says, hey, Axel, that sounds interesting, I want to talk to you. Why would I want to talk to you? Part of the answer would probably be, well, because you did 22 years of military, and then you decided maybe a job and found it's not the thing, and then you went on your own, right? So having had that experience is a totally different ballgame. I'm sure that's the same for you than talking to somebody who went to college and got a job at HP or something like that.
Yeah.
They cannot at all relate what it means. It also, there is obviously things that you need to adjust to, but it's very dependent, in my experience, on what do you want to do, right? Yep. If you say, I want to live into the love of carpentry, that's what I want to do. I want to do carpentry. And then you can go into more details. Well, depending on how big or small you want to do it, you can basically be the commander of your carpentry business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If on the other hand, let's say you love cooking and you want to do a restaurant, yeah, you can be, but you have to learn some of the people skills that we probably didn't quite learn that well in the military, right? Because it's a different kind of people skills. So it's very dependent on what you actually have as a passion that you want to live into. And I want to say one thing as kind of like a capstone on this. I only later, after I got out of the military, realized how awesome of an opportunity it is, at least for those who can do it, to have at least two completely different careers with the option at a point in your life where you're not as immature anymore as like 16, 17, 19, 20 when you get out of school or into the military, but at a more mature point to say, I have a much better idea what I'm passionate about. And then have the opportunity to say, let me try everything that I can for the rest of my life, do that or most of that I'm passionate about. Very few people, honestly, get the opportunity without pain. That's the important part, without pain. You can make the decision, obviously, but for most people, if they say, I went all in for accounting and I became accountant, I'm working in accounting for a large company, but my real passion is gardening.
Yeah.
If you make the decision, screw this accounting, I'm going to start gardening, it's going to be painful, I can tell you that. And whatever the other thing is, in most cases, in most people's life, it's painful in the transition. However successful this other thing that you be passionate about might be. As you and I, people from the military, we have a defined end date, we get paid, we get benefits and all this stuff. We even get, if we long enough, we get some pension money. But we can prepare what we want to do and make sure that it is at least significantly in the direction of our passion. So it's a great gift in a way that's not really oftentimes portrayed that way. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I often encourage people, young people that may not know what they want to do in life, to go into the military just to get the job training and the experience. And, you know, you spend 4 years in the military, you come out with more experience than so many other people. But what I've found for the most part is, let's just say the example of like a mechanic on military vehicles. They'll do 4 years as a mechanic, but they don't, like you said, they don't seek out mentors or prepare. That last 6 months of service, they could make contact with mechanics where they want to move to and live out of the military, and go ahead and line up a job, go ahead and line up, you know, training, whatever they need. But most people just don't prepare, and that's where the downfall is.
And what I see, I mean, with a 4 year or 6 year commitment, it's probably slightly different because you're probably trying to get into something that you're already interested in. In my case, just to take that as an example, I desperately wanted to do flying, to the point that when the airline said no, I said, okay, then I do it for the military. In my case, it was more a medical thing. I couldn't have just continued the same thing. So it kind of forced me in a way to say, what else do you want to do? But the other thing is also, as you're basically becoming more conscious on how you actually want to shape your life, right? Which also means oftentimes you find a spouse and you start a family and those kind of things. I also feel people in the military, if you're not 4 years, but if you're in a little longer, you have, for example, this great advantage of having access to VA money, right? Like, so you can actually start your investing. And what's kind of also funny, for most people with longer careers, the military inherently means you have to move.
Yeah.
Right? They move you from here to here to here. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, okay, if your assignments are mainly international, get a house in every location. That would be quite tricky. But in the context, what we said earlier about, you know, reaching out to a mentor, if you say, okay, how do I take advantage of, number one, having a VA loan, and number two, being moved around every 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
If you like, let's say, have a 15-year career or something like that, you can have 3 houses, you know, that are financed very, very accommodating, especially if you look at it right now. Now, the interest rate is obviously still the interest rate, but not having to make any down payment is a super high advantage, right? And so for me, when I have people, and if anybody listens in the military, when I say reach out to a mentor, it's not only because a mentor can help you identify what your next career after the military could or should be according to your passion, but it could also be to say, how can I take some of the things that the military offers, kind of a benefit of the system, and apply it in preparation for either the rest of my life, or this is one of my passions is, how can we start thinking about generational wealth? Right, yeah. Because if you were already wealthy, this is kind of like a little bit of an I don't know, philosophical thing, I believe, without really having empirical evidence. I believe it's pretty rare, accepting monarchy or stuff like that, to have wealthy people join the military.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And if you're inherently wealthy, you come from a wealthy family and stuff like that, you're rather doing like a prestigious university thing somewhere in a nice country or stuff. You know, if you're obviously the son or the whatever of the queen, then you have to do some military. So monarchy is a little different, but otherwise, you know, business, wealthy, inheritance, that kind of people, you don't typically find them in the military. So why I'm saying this is this idea of generational wealth would mean you might have the first opportunity in your family to not only have a successful career in the military, followed by another successful career that you passionately apply yourself into, but because of some of the benefits, you can actually start a portfolio oftentimes earlier than most others, because you don't need any collected, saved down payment money to start a passive income portfolio with the idea of generational wealth. Now, I know this term generational wealth is hard to grasp when you're 25 and 30, but I still keep pounding it, because it's really, you know, the one thing, regardless what you're into when it comes to money, if you step back, strip everything away down to the bones, what you find anything related to money, success is almost exclusively dependent on time. Yeah. You can do almost anything with money. You say, I want to do something crazy, something that nobody else does, and I give it 60, 70, 80 years. If you could start when your grandma gives you the first money for the piggy bank, and you do that crazy thing, and when you're done at 85 or something like that, that crazy thing has made you a millionaire. No doubt about it. Assuming it's something that is staying, right? And the crazy thing could be stock market. You could be saying, every penny that I get, I just put in the S&P 500. That's probably not ever going to go away. If you do this for 80 years or 70 years, you'll be multi super rich.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the same thing is you say, okay, I invest in insurance companies. I invest in gold. I invest in real estate. It's almost irrelevant if you can give it long enough time.
Yeah.
Right? And this is also, to put a finer point on it, it's a challenge, in my opinion, when I talk to my mentoring clients to say, okay, who says that you shouldn't be the first if your existing family, the one that you were born into, either didn't have the opportunity or whatever the circumstances are, that means there isn't a whole lot there that you will one day inherit other than maybe the house that you were born in.
Yeah.
But then why don't you make it part of your goal to change that and be basically, in a way, like almost, you could be the patriarch ultimately. Not now, but in 50, 60, 70 years, who says, okay, this is, and I don't mean the term, I mean the role, right? For me, I took this on. Both my parents had not a whole lot of money. My grandparents didn't have, in Germany it was hard anyway with World War II, everything got destroyed pretty much. So I said, well, other family members said that for themselves. I said it also for myself, for my little part of the family. I want to make sure that my daughter and my grandson and the rest, my wife and whoever else is part of that family, that branch of that tree, will never have to be worried that they don't have enough to have shelter and food and stuff like that. And I can achieve that in my lifetime. And I want to also, for your audience, say, I really only started at 42 because I was too dumb. No mentor, no nothing. That's why I'm preaching like this. I wish I had known this while I was still in the military. I had somebody that helped me like the last few years, and maybe even earlier when I moved from station to station. If I would have bought a house in every place, right, get permission to live off base, get a place with a VA loan. By the time I got out 22 years now, and you wouldn't do it right away, but the journey would have been shorter than it ultimately was. But even with I got out at 42. I am now at the point, okay, it took 20 years, 25 years almost, but it's doable. But the sooner you start, that's the point, right? If you start when grandma gives you the first few dollars, that's the best point. And every point after that is the second best point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, as we start winding down, one question I always like to ask everybody that's on here, if you could recommend the top 3 resources that somebody could read or listen to, something like that, that would set them up for success. So a book, podcast, anything like that. What would you recommend?
Wow, that's tricky. Well, I want to be cheeky. I would say from a topics perspective, what should you know or what should you become aware of? I would recommend listen to the Lex Fridman podcast. And if you want to challenge yourself, start like beginning 2024. Don't just go and say, okay, from now on, I'm going to listen. Because if you go to like January 2024 and start listening from there, and you can try to catch up to today, that gives you a really, really good idea what's going on in the world right now, and answers the question, where do you fit in?
Yeah. And what's the name of that again?
Lex Fridman. He only has like 6 million subscribers or so.
Yeah. All right.
The second one I would say is read and follow what Ray Dalio is saying.
Okay.
He's written a bunch of really good books. And then the cheeky one is read my book. It's called The Idea Vice Goer. Because that way, Lex is really broad, global perspective. He interviews like the president of India, Vladimir Putin, those, and irrelevant of politics. Really how does the work? He has interviewed Elon Musk 5 times, the CEO of Google and so on. So really, you really get great perspective from the horse's mouth. And what's so awesome about his podcast is most episodes are between 2.5 and 4.5 hours.
Yeah. So really good long form.
You really get to know the other person, a person that you normally never have access to. And when you ever hear about them, you know their name, but all you always only hear is a headline.
Yeah.
Or some kind of opinion of the journalist that shouldn't really have the name journalist, should be the opinionator. Right. Yeah. So that's what you know. When you listen for 3 hours to what Narendra Modi has to say as the president of India, wow, you get a totally different perspective, right? And it makes you understand how certain things work. And Ray Dalio is in the same direction. For me, I'm saying it's cheeky, but it's also when people say, okay, how can my life look like? I say, you want to be the creator of your own future, which means you have to have a business, if for no other reason than to build the assets that allow you to live the life that you want to live and generate generational wealth. And then you need a method, right? So the first part is, how do we build your business empire, if only for that purpose? And then what is in it, right? Yeah. And the Idea Wealth Grower talks about how do you diversify your portfolio? Why do you use real estate and gold and diamonds and things like that? And what's the process? I think if you were to do this and dedicate a certain amount of time every day to doing those 3 things, you're automatic, and not automatically, but you will be successful, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's almost hard not to be successful if you do all this right.
But the part why you might not be successful is if you refuse to apply.
Yeah.
What can happen if you do those 3 things, you could be accused of having analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm a big fan of mentorship. I would hope that you come to me or to you, Dr. David, or to anybody else who provides mentorship, where you say, I've heard this and this and this, and my opinion starts forming. Now I want to apply. If you never apply, you will not be successful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now, where are you living these days? What part of the country or part of the world?
We are in the San Diego area.
Okay. All right. So out west, San Diego, where
Out
it's
west,
beautiful
yeah,
and
in North,
72 degrees every
it's
day.
called North County.
Yep. Well,
Yeah,
you are
San
still
Diego
surrounded by U.S. military there, so I mean, it's you
yeah,
fit
yeah.
in
We have the
well. I
Marines, we have the Navy. We used to actually have some Air Force, but they moved out. So,
bet. Yeah. So a real off-topic question, and I'll end it with this one. All politics aside, as a pilot, were you watching all the news from that bombing the other day? Because I was fascinated by the long-range aspect of what they did.
well, I did a lot of that. I bought fighter jets from Germany to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It's just a shitload of air-to-air refueling, I can tell you.
Oh yeah.
And that's what these guys did. Now, a bomber obviously has inherently more range, so I would assume they did air-to-air probably 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
3 times probably on the way there, and then maybe 2 more times on the way back. And it's a freaking long mission, especially in a bomber because they can go very fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a question about the ability of long range, or what's the
Oh, just curious what you thought about that, because I mean, I was really interested to see, just the aspects of the long range flight.
Yeah, I mean, if you purely look at it from an aviation perspective, it's what do they call it? Taking a shotgun and shooting at sparrows, right? Like it's basically from a military, like from a there is no enemy. Right? I think for the type of plane that they used, and for the type of ammunition that they used, and for the type of target that they attacked, it's like literally it's not really a challenge, even though the politicians made it out as a challenge. Even from an air defense perspective, I don't really think that it is a credible challenge, even though there is a little bit of that. But if I look at what Iran has in air defense, it's not really for modern military like the US, especially using B-2s and stuff like that. So it's literally not really a hard or fair fight. Now, the other thing is when you go to the ammunitions, I was pretty deeply into knowing what the bunker buster bombs did in Iraq. And there are limits to them. Two limits. I'm pretty sure the B-2s use GBU ammunition, which is basically you guiding it all the way to impact from the plane, which is, by the way, much easier to do in a bomber than when we did it in a fighter jet, because you're still flying and you have this mini little joystick. That's actually one of the things that's not totally wrong in Top Gun, right? When Maverick is trying to keep the pointer, the laser pointer on the target while pulling G's like crazy. It's freaking hard, I can tell you, because I've done it. But the other part is obviously the people in Iran knew what happened in Iraq, right? So and we can all have our opinion. What kind of people are they, and whether it's religious or political opinions that they have. But inherently, people that have built a culture like Iran, if you really think about it, it was called Babylon, part of Babylon at the time, and then of course called Persia for a long time, and now we call it Iran. So there's a little bit of history there. These people are not dumb people. They didn't just come around the corner yesterday. So when they see, okay, in the Iraq war, everything that was like 30 feet or so, in thickness, and they found a window or a door or something that they could get through, they got it in. And the big thing about bunker busting is you get through the hole and then you explode inside. Instead of exploding on impact. Now, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist or anything like that every Iranian, they want to protect their nuclear facilities, made it at least 60, 80, 100 feet deep. Right? There are some people that are saying it's 180 feet deep. So just assuming you could find a hole that you could get through, this thing is not going to go through very far and then it explodes. Well, if the whole thing you get through is followed by some sort of concrete, multiple layers and so forth, inside where the stuff is, I would have serious doubts that they caused a lot of damage. Now, is it easy to get to it when the first 100 feet have been blown away? No. So it's definitely true that even if they protected this stuff properly and most of it is still there, it's going to be a huge effort to ever get back to it.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they don't have all the utilities needed underground, so that's probably all gone. So the statement that I believe is true militarily is it lengthened the opportunity of Iran to do something with nuclear weapons significantly. Yeah. I would guess probably at least a year. Even if they would put 100% dedication on it, I would say at least a year. Now, I want to, and I'm glad that you allow me maybe that last part, from the legal perspective, on the nation state level, United Nations or nations among each other, the whole thing is obviously, and I know that nobody in the media is saying it, many people are very afraid. This is one of the most egregious efforts in total. It started with what the Israelis did and basically, if you look at, if you were to ask me next time, David, give me an example of hypocrisy. I would say, okay, look at what we said about Putin attacking Ukraine, and look at what we said about Israel attacking Iran. That's about as much hypocrisy as you can get. Right? By the standards that the community of nations has agreed to, when is war warranted?
Yep.
Really shooting war, you attacking somebody else. Even if you say there is such a thing, which I find is a little weird, honestly, but let's assume there is such a thing like preemptive self-defense. George W. Bush has basically used that to say, I know that they have WMDs, so I have to basically kill everything in preventive self-defense. Yeah. Well, it's kind of shitty when there's nothing there. And in this
they didn't
case,
find anything.
But the thing is, Israel can maybe make the claim that there is nuclear material, meaning like enriched uranium. I don't think even Israel would make a credible claim that they have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And to say,
well, you see what happened after the ceasefire too. I mean,
but
Trump was pretty upset about that one.
Right, but the point for me is not so much look at the hypocrisy. You could, and you might be entertained and chuckle a little bit about it. But here's the other part that I believe is, when you say, I studied leadership, I studied strategy, I have a military background. This thing, now this is basically, Putin did something that was absolutely deplorable, and I believe personally, if I were in charge, I would have reacted as the West, much stronger. Just had to be shut down, and to say, if somebody does this, this is how you get shut down. I'm not talking nuclear weapons, but there would have been things we could have done. If we would have, meaning like the West, would have flown a mission like this, but a little bit more planes, put a few B-52s in it to just make a little bit more, not below the ground statement. You do this along the war line or the border where they basically attacked Ukraine. That would have made a statement, and I think that thing would have been pretty much over. It wasn't done. Here we are 3 years later. Now we have a second case. Now we have nuclear involved. And what I believe, and I know this is probably a lonely position on almost anywhere in the world other than developing countries, the gate has been opened now. For one time, you can say that was an exception. Second time, 3 years later, while the first time is still going on, it's not an exception anymore. Anybody in the world who says, I believe there is somebody that I declare my enemy that could be doing something that I feel threatened by, I can go and just invade.
Yeah.
And take the examples. Just think about if India feels threatened by North Korea, or Japan is not finding it funny anymore that the missiles from North Korea fly over them all the time, or India and Pakistan have the next thing, but the Pakistani don't want to wait until the Indians come over. These are just a few of the countries that have nuclear weapons. But anybody else in the world could say, I'm just attacking the other guys. It was okay for Putin, it was okay for Israel, and just as okay for me. And then they show you pages after pages after pages of Western press to say this is acceptable preemptive self-defense.
Yeah.
That to me
it's
is
a tricky road.
Oh, it's done. It's not a tricky road anymore, David. But with all due respect, it's done.
Yeah.
And I think this shows lack of strategic thinking. This is purely power play. Somebody says, I want to show the amount of power I have so that everybody knows I can do whatever I want to. Strategically forgetting that anybody who is in power somewhere would assume that same right. Whether it's somebody in Africa, somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere in Asia, now that we have basically played that card, everybody will assume that right.
Yeah.
And that made, if you go really full picture, we talk on radio kind of level, that made the world, this thing, however easy it was military, made the globe way, way more insecure than it was a few days ago.
Yeah, definitely more volatile.
Yeah, because everybody is saying if they can do it, I can do it. It's sanctioned.
Yep.
It's sanctioned, unprovoked attack. And originally, 200 countries around the world had basically agreed to each other that we won't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll
military, easy peasy, impressive. I love the guys that actually had to, and I also envious, right? In the bomber, you have actually a bathroom, right? We never had that.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah. I mean, if anybody ever is being told, Dr. David, we want you to fly from A to B. It's only going to be 13 hours. If you have to pee, you have to hold it.
Yeah.
That's what we did because there is no bathroom to go to. So that part, flying the mission, hitting the target, doing a great job. Nobody got injured. Nobody got shot down.
Yeah.
Awesome. Global politics, world order, horrendous, and short-sighted. Very, very short-sighted.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and end this because I know me and you both got to get ready for our next
sorry.
Oh, no. We're good. Thanks for being on here, though. And before I leave, where can people find you? What's your website where you want them to get in touch?
Well, the easiest is you can use website. You can go Google anything AI. Just put in ideal wealth grower and you find us. And then there's search around a bit, but there's always a button to arrange a call. And I love to get to know people. And like I said earlier, if somebody looks for a mentor, it's not just what we're talking about, but are we actually connecting as individuals, as human beings? And when the connection is there and we have a common goal, then let's rock and roll.
All right. Sounds good. And I'll put the link and everything in the show notes. And I'll see you in a few minutes on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you.